A world war is something few people think is possible in this post-Cold War globalized world. Crises between great powers seem to be a thing of the past in this day and age, but war and conflict are still very real, and the possibility of an escalation, though remote, still exists in many regions of the planet, with even the smallest acts having the capacity of plunging the world into chaos once again. August 15th, 1947. The British Raj is no more. Now, in its place, there are two countries, a majority Hindu state, called India, and, awkwardly divided by its sides, the state of Pakistan, a majority Muslim state. War soon followed, and repeated itself 4 times. 74 years and 2 new nuclear powers later, escalation seems to be far-fetched of a possibility. With conflicts being limited to border clashes in the region of Kashmir, no clear support for either side in case of war, and a general lack of ability to wage such a war for long periods of time, Pakistan's economy in shambles, and Narendra Modi's consolidation of power in India in full course, an all-out war becomes quite hard to imagine. If you take into account the current globalized economy, external pressures, and the loss and destruction that a conflict of that magnitude would entail, it is also hard to imagine the great powers of today caring to throw themselves in all-out war in the name of what is, in nature, a purely regional conflict. But, though the scenario is not likely to happen, the possibility still remains, as both today and in the past, even a series of complete rational decisions can lead to catastrophe. Although most people in the world wouldn't think of the Indian subcontinent as likely of a place for the start of a global conflict, and a general ignorance of the issue, the other tension points around the world are again as, if not more, unlikely to bear conflict. If, for example, we were to examine another tension point, way more known and commented on, and with an actual conventional conflict going on between two nations, it would look like a more expressive point for the start of such a conflict. But if analyzed from a closer perspective, we would be looking at a overstretched Russia, fully occupied with its current invasion, and with no more resources to spare for a potential expansion elsewhere, and the Ukraine, who has been able to put up a fight against Russia in the last 2 years, and that was even able to make some advances, but that relies on a West that does not want an open conflict with Russia, happy to see it weakened and slowly driven out of a losing war against a consistent but small Ukrainian advance, who, although successful, does not threaten the existence of the Russian state, thus not driving it to its last option. With the Russians not having resources for expansion elsewhere, and a Ukrainian drive against the Kremlin being heavily unlikely, a global catastrophe starting in the region seems to be contained in its conflict. In East Asia, conflict has been simmering between the People's Republic of China, the PRC, and the Republic of China, commonly known as Taiwan. For over 70 years, both have claimed to be the legitimate government of China. The PRC maintains its sovereignty claim over Taiwan, frequently threatening invasion, while Taiwan edges closer to declaring formal independence. These tensions could reach a critical point. However, when we analyze the situation, it becomes clear that Taiwan poses even greater challenges for the PRC than Ukraine does to Russia. A seaborne invasion of Taiwan would be incredibly complex, both in terms of human lives and financial resources. The risks are exacerbated by the potential destruction of Taiwan's semiconductor industry, a critical component of the global tech supply chain and vital to China's own economy. Moreover, the prospect of direct American intervention makes the likelihood of war breaking out even more remote. At this point, you may look at the title of this video and wonder, how could a Great War even be a possibility in a world so interconnected where the consequences of such conflict would be catastrophic? It seems almost impossible that we could ever reach that point. And yes, you're absolutely right to think that way. On the surface, it seems like the very structure of our global society, marked by economic ties, international diplomacy, and the overwhelming fear of mutual destruction, should be enough to keep such a disaster at bay. Indeed, the world today is rife with instability, yet these conflicts often remain contained, either due to a lack of capacity to escalate them into something larger, or because of the fear of a prolonged, costly war. But this containment hinges on the belief that wars, especially something as catastrophic as a great war, are the product of either completely irrational decisions or, paradoxically, rational decisions leading to such an outcome. The truth is, predicting the future is impossible, and that's where the danger lies. Irrational outcomes can emerge from a series of rational decisions, simply because the future is shaped by the actions of billions of people around the globe, all making choices simultaneously. These decisions inevitably crash, creating a complex web of interactions that can lead to a vast array of outcomes, some of them unforeseen and deeply destructive. Crucially, decisions made by world leaders based on the rational assessment of the situation at hand can be among the most significant. However, even these well-considered decisions can collide with others in ways that spiral out of control. Miscalculations, misunderstandings, or simply the interplay of competing interests can escalate conflicts in ways no one intended, potentially leading us down the path to an irrational and catastrophic outcome. The best historical example of that is the Great War, which started in an already tense situation, but in a very unexpected way. Tensions escalated not because of a direct feud between the great powers, but through a death in the corner of Europe. That led to a series of decisions, triggering a series of alliances, leading up to the Austro-Hungarian demands over Serbia that were mostly accepted, except for a final point concerning the participation of Austrian officials in investigations on Serbian territory. The German support to Austria in case of war also led to Russia, with guarantees from France, to start mobilizing, and after the assassination, Germany had declared war against Russia, France, and Belgium, the latter taking the British Empire into the war. All the decisions taken by the belligerents in the conflict right after the death were meant to establish their positions as great powers of the time, to scare their enemies into submission, to gain international clout, and maybe some territorial concessions, a simple reframing of the concept of Europe that at most, they thought, would lead to a limited and swift war that would be over by Christmas. What they did not expect was a war that would send over 20 million people to their deaths, collapse 4 empires, and open the door for even more death and destruction. The Austrians wanted a small and easy war with Serbia to expand their sphere of influence in Europe and reaffirm their ragged empire as an European power with German support. They thought it possible, and even if that involved war with the Russians, their poor performance in the Russian-Japanese War made they think the war as a small conflict that would lead to a negotiated peace in their favor. The Germans wanted to contain Russia, which they feared would become uncontainable, and set themselves as the undisputed European power and also gain more of a place in the sun in the imperial game, even if it involved the French. The French allied and supported the Russians as a way to contain Germany and get revenge for the Franco-Prussian War, while the Russians wanted control of the Balkans and ports open year-round to the Mediterranean. As for the British, they got involved into the conflict using the German invasion of Belgium as a pretext to maintain their old policy of cracking down anyone too close to consolidating power in the continent and coming to pose a threat to the British Isles and their empire as a whole. All of those decisions were based on facts, or what they thought were facts, and made rationally. The leaders of Europe were not crazy. The problem was not so much the decisions, but the actions taken in response. That may sound obvious, but if one of those decisions was not taken, if one of those countries involved did not enter this war, if the British did not declare war on Germany, if the French did not support Russia, if the Germans did not support the Austrians, the result might have been something more akin to the Crimean War or the Austro-Prussian War, a more limited conflict that did not involve more than 2 or 3 European powers. If we use the same pattern to our current political situation, we also might see a local conflict escalating into something much bigger, an unlikely conflict starting due to a series of decisions made by promises of support, or a global conflict coming from an incident in a region considered secondary in importance by many, but still bringing the world into a level of destruction never seen before.